well, what is up, everyone? Welcome to episode number 46 of the Faith and Pop Culture Podcast. It is me, your host, Daniel, and I am joined, as I always am, by the gas station burrito to my upset stomach, Mr. Samuel David Camp. What is up?
So be honest, Daniel, when's the last time you had a gas station fare?
I mean, the not too distant past.
Yeah.
I've dabbled from time to time. You stop at Cutie, you see they're turning on the thing, they're warm.
It smells good. How bad
You
could it be, right?
the stuff inside, at least the label says it's like steak and cheese. Like you sort of have to just take their word for it because you can't trust your eyes. You just gotta take a step of faith and
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Pay the price later.
carpe diem. Don't think about those consequences.
Thankfully, thankfully, I have not partaken of such delicacies in a while. So
Well, I mean,
uh,
you'll probably live longer then, because I'm pretty sure
I
you're,
hope so.
those can't be good for the health. But I'm a gas station guy. Like I love,
Yeah.
and it's not even as much the snacks because most of it's gross. It's just like the hunt. Like every gas station to me, it's like you
It's a
don't know
little bit
what to
different.
expect. Like the more
Yeah.
run down and like not kept up, usually is the better. And you find like little treats from like a decade ago, still in the corner. It's
They've
all
got hot like sausage, egg, and cheese biscuits that who knows how long they've been under the lamp.
I know. It's just that's you haven't lived until you sort of live on the
It's
wild
sort of
side.
I would say that's very much an American tradition. Like are you even in America if you're not like finding some like
I know that should be a
food
part
at a
of like
gas station that may or may not should be there.
that probably hasn't passed the health code inspections. That should be like the citizen test. Something that's not quite as much fun, but still pretty fun as gas stations, is talking about pop culture every week. So we're back once again, and there's kind of some interesting some stories that we didn't get to last week. Kind of some overarching theme. I'm all about the big themes.
Yeah.
There's a
We
couple
like
of
to
kind of
like tie it all together nicely in a bow.
we'll see how we can how we can thread the needle here because there's a couple of things that kind of happening in culture that are like very different things on their own, but I do think there is some like some shared commonalities between them. But before we get to some of those, uh, I did call an audible because I did see like right before we went filming something popped up on my feed that I thought we should at least mention. And again, this is fresh off the press, so this may the story is not yet finished for what
Yeah.
will happen after
Breaking
this.
news.
So we don't have chapter 2, we just have the intro. And that is Mr. Tim Allen of multiple TV shows, the Santa Claus, and what's his big show? Is the
Home
Jewel
Improvement was like
Home
his big.
Improvement?
At least
Um,
that's what, the sort of the OG was like Home Improvement was when I was a kid. And
yeah, and I mean
but I mean, he's been in like Toy
Toy
Story,
Story.
yeah, all
But
the
so
Santa Claus movies.
he was on the artist formerly known as Twitter on X, and he sent out a tweet that has gone viral and sparked discussion, which is really what it's all about. But he tweeted out, he said, "Finished the Old Testament, and it is such a gift when I get out of the way and the words and meaning flow. This week I am now in the book of the Gospel of Paul, a Roman Jew familiar with Plato, Stoicism, and other Greek schools of thought. I am amazed in 7 pages." Uh, which I mean, if you're paying attention, if you're sort of leaning into that tweet a little bit and dissecting some hermeneutics, uh, as many people online, I mean, thousands of people, tens of thousands by the looks of it, are. It sparked some debate about what, in fact, Mr. Tim Allen is reading, and uh, so I'll pass it off to you. Sam. When's the last time that you did like a deep sort of deep dive into the Gospel of Paul?
Well, I try and do that annually, but I haven't gotten to it yet this year. And so, I'll let you know if there's any new nuggets that I have yet to be uncovered since
Yeah,
my last reading of
it's
the
it's always
Gospel of
fresh
Paul.
every time you return to it. You're
Yeah,
finding something
it's
new that you haven't.
evergreen. I that's what I say about the Gospel of Paul.
Well, one of the things that I find the advantage too is that like it doesn't the Gospel of Paul doesn't often get covered in church. Like pastors, that's not a go-to. So it's like when you read it on your own,
Yeah, it's
like this, you
it's
haven't
a
heard this sermon on this 100 times. Like
I know
it's
it's an often overlooked gospel, I would
oh,
say.
so it
Perhaps
is
always overlooked.
uh, at least if you're an Orthodox, um, unless you're part of some offshoot Christianity.
Yeah,
Um,
which who knows? Maybe lo and behold, that's what Tim Allen and the I don't know whatever church of something.
which I am curious. Again, like I said, I just saw it. I don't think he's like responded to it or anything. But
Do you think that? Yeah, I guess my
I'm
question
curious
would be,
what is he? Because I mean, like he's pretty specifically referring to Paul, and he's like who Paul was.
yeah,
Like, I'm curious what he mean. Like maybe he
like
just means.
my guess is going to be like by the time folks are listening to this podcast, there will probably already be like an addendum to this. If we have closure by the time I edit this and upload, I'll maybe put something up here. Um, but I think I just wonder if is he referring to like Romans or some of his Paul's letters, but like just misreferring to like
Yeah,
the
I guess
writings.
my.
That would be my guess. And like
Yeah,
it's
like I'm
fun
not
to kind of
questioning. I don't want to call into into question his belief. Right? It seems like it's
right.
probably an honest mistake,
Yeah.
but it's just funny. Like it's just, and it's funny to me too because like this is not the first time that he has sort of spoken out on behalf of Christianity and his faith in a way that needed a few like follow-ups to like to
Yeah. I
correct.
can't I feel like he has done like I can't recall any specifics from the past, but I do feel like he has sort of done a number of things where it's like, maybe he's not the spokesperson that we're looking for. Um, Although like he seems like a great guy. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think that kind of gets into some of what we want to discuss today, but it's like you know, just because you have a platform doesn't mean that you should feel obligated to speak on behalf of a large swath of people, especially on things as hotly contested as religion, you
Yeah,
know. And
and I mean, like to be fair, like I don't know if he's necessarily doing that. Like he's sharing,
yeah, yeah.
like the same way we would share like an Instagram post and put some slap a Bible verse on it and like make like, we're just sharing our um
Well, and I mean, I think I would say that, hey, I mean, I'm, you know, uh, glad to hear that he's reading the Bible. Um, which Bible, I guess, will TBD. So assuming he references the Old Testament, so one can only hope that he's reading the Bible. Um, and I mean, so I think that's great. But I think it goes to sort of, I think the point that we will probably make here in a minute is that um, there's a weird thing that happens when celebrities wade in to sort of I think specifically Christianity, because I can't really speak for any other religion.
yeah, it's
But
like
that
it's when it becomes part of the sort of the public persona, like the
yeah,
and I don't even know how to necessarily explain what I mean by that, but like when it's like when it goes beyond, and I'm not saying that he's this way, but like when
yeah.
it goes beyond just like the authentic personal faith and becomes sort of like this is like
When it becomes part of your brand, I think
yeah, like I
is
think
sort
even
of
someone like and I don't have anything against her, but like someone like a Candace Cameron Bure is
that.
kind of like it just seems like anytime we need to hear anything about Christianity, like we pull her up and like we're always like it's yeah when it's become sort of part of your public, you're the professional Christian out there talking like which does kind of lead into some of the stuff that I thought we could get into because there's sort of two different related things that have happened. One related to Joe Rogan, the uh, host of the second most popular podcast in the world after the Faith and Pop Culture podcast, and then also we're a couple days into June, which means it is Pride Month as we have every June, and there's some conversations kind of about that. But kind of the thing as I've been thinking about all these different stories, I feel like the question that, like, the overarching theme of this is kind of this idea of, like, sort of how do you influence a culture? Like, and again, that's something that I think Christians have a vested interest in asking. But I sort of like, does culture change? Some of the stuff come like top down or like bottom up? Like, is it trickle down? You know, you aim at the structures, like the movers and shakers, and then you change them, and then everything else falls in line, or is it more like the grassroots sort of stuff? Um, but maybe to start, like the Joe Rogan. So this is a couple weeks. Some of this sort of has been trickling out. It's like been a story. Like, some of the big conversations happened about last week. We just weren't able to get to it yet. But uh, the kind of revelation, if you will, of that Joe Rogan has, in fact, according to some people, been attending church regularly, it seems. And kind of this stems back to his podcast episode 2252, where he had on Wesley Huff, who's like a Canadian apologist, uh, to, to have like, 3 hour conversation where he just sort of like geeked out about the Bible and like
Yeah.
some of the reliability and the archaeological, like the translation process. And it was an interesting conversation that went by, at least in like Christian circles. People are like, hey, we have a nerdy Christian apologist geeking out about Bible stuff on like arguably the biggest media platform like in the world.
Yeah.
You don't sort of see that every day. So like just the fact that he had it on, I mean, like, at the collision, like I wrote an article about that, and it was like that's our biggest article probably of the whole year. Is people just had a big interest in that. So kind of a follow up. Wesley Huff, the guest that was on the show, was just on a different podcast. I think last week or about 4 or 5 days ago. The Know What You Believe with Michael Horton podcast, which actually Michael Horton wrote my theology textbook in seminary. So he's
Hmm.
an interesting
A
an
familiar
interesting guy.
name to you, at least.
Yeah. So he was on that podcast, and like they're talking about other stuff. It wasn't really about the Joe Rogan, but kind of at the end, someone sort of asked him to, have you heard from Joe Rogan again? And Huff shares that, in fact, they have talked and communicated, you know, periodically since the recording of that, and that, according to him, he's heard or whatever that like Rogan is attending a church, and like things seem to be moving, and he's just inquisitive and like asking questions, and it just seems. Which again, if you're not a big Joe Rogan guy, like he hasn't always been like. I know he's sort of become gets lumped into sort of like the conservatives now, which is sort of funny if you
Yeah.
sort of his history, but like he's never been very. I mean, he's like an open-minded guy, but like he, he's he's not someone that has been like super pro-Christian. Like,
Yeah.
he's been pretty clear that like he doesn't believe any of that stuff and doesn't, he's fine to talk to people that believe different stuff. But like, um, so I mean, like on the one hand, like that's cool. Like,
Yeah.
that there's stuff coming from that. Uh, so part of the conversation is that. The second part of the conversation is what always happens, it seems, in these sort of things, and that is that Christians are, many Christians rush out to get the olive oil and like quick to anoint, anointing ceremony, bring back Samuel from the dead and anoint, our new prophet of Joe Rogan. So like a lot of the reporting, is very bold claims about, how Christianity is completely transforming Rogan's life, and he doesn't go anywhere without his Bible and all this. Like, he is like Johnny Christian, since that conversation, to the point even that so there's a tweet, like Fox News did a tweet, like a story, where they tweeted it out. Faith first. Joe Rogan is embracing the teachings of God in a major lifestyle shift. Says after diving into Christianity and the Bible with Wesley Huff on the show earlier this year, the podcast giant has made scripture a part of his daily routine, which sounds really good and like exciting, except that it may not, in fact, be true, because Wesley Huff ended up tweeting to Fox News, kind of quote tweeting the article, said, "Hey, Fox News, your article on this, attributes things to me that I did not say, and also conflates statements to me that were actually said by my colleagues at the Apologetics Canada. I'd encourage you to do a little bit better in your reporting with actually getting who said what correct. So it's kind of a big mess from there, sort of like the, like whatever the saying is about like the size of the fist grow. Like as this has got passed along,
Yeah.
we're like about a week away from the tweets that Joe Rogan is starting his own mega church or something.
Yeah.
Um, but so I think it's interesting because like
Yeah.
there's different parts to it. I think there's like the news part of it of like, hey, that's cool that Joe Rogan's a guy that a lot of people know, listen to, has an influence. Like, you know, that there is sort of some continuation from that podcast and some talk. And um, so there's sort of that part of it. The other part of it, which I thought we could get into, is just sort of the response. So
Yeah.
what do we do with these? And like, how do we not approach these in a way that we just like, well, like, I think well-intentioned,
Yeah.
maybe most of the time well-intentioned, but like,
Well, most self-inflicted wounds are well-intentioned, I think.
yeah, like, I don't think it's, but there is a sense of sort of getting a little too, uh, like wanting to run a little too fast with this.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't intentionally shoot themselves in the foot. I'll say that that is, I think, probably mostly accidental. Um, but I think, I think it's one of those things where, we whatever the celebrity du jour, the who makes any sort of statement about Christianity or anything even like adjacently related to maybe they're going to a church, then it's like it's when celebrities do that, and I guess partly it's a fact of celebrity, but anytime that happens, it's like people in Christianity are like quick to sort of like just go and proclaim that, just inflate whatever it is they said so that it's like, see, even this person, believes in believes in Christianity or trusts Jesus now, and make all these statements as if, an endorsement of Christianity from Joe Rogan is the thing that's required of our faith. Like somehow, if Joe Rogan believes that the Christianity is true, then that validates what I believe. And so it's a weird thing I think that happens with just sort of, I guess, the churches, and again I use that very loosely, like, but like the church's response to celebrity, either conversions or in this case curiosities, explorations. It's just a weird thing for them to sort of latch onto it and, you know, maybe blow it out of proportion, but also um, there's this tendency to just like hang a lot of our, I don't know, evangelism on the shoulders of whoever the current celebrity who's endorsing Christianity is.
are
And
you
it's
are you
just,
trying to say that Kanye West Sunday services weren't in fact what was needed to bring revival?
well, the Lord works in mysterious ways. And so I don't want to judge any one person's uh, faith journey, I guess. But it's like, yeah,
But I do think you're right. Like I
how's
think
that going? Yeah,
I think the issue is not because you can go too far the other way of like, well, if they're famous, then like, they have to like go above and beyond to like
right.
prove their devotion. Like
Yeah,
no, like I think there's a level of just like, hey, when God's working in anyone, that's cool. And Christian shouldn't be too, like, well, I check back with me in 2 years and see,
yeah,
I don't like
yeah,
that. But it's when you go beyond like when it's not about, hey, this is cool, God's working, and it's more like this is sort of this like almost like a gimmick, like a cheat code now we have. Like, we have
yeah,
this validation and like, it's we can use this. Like it's very, like, okay, we don't even necessarily care if it's fully true. We're gonna like make it, we're gonna make this into what we need to like, as though, if we can make, like this Fox News, like, if we can sort of inflate the story, then people are going to be like, well, he's cool and he's popular and he's famous. So like, if he's reading his Bible, then like, therefore we're going to have, revivals around the corner. And it is
Yeah.
just sort of that, like I said at the start, like, it's that top down of like, not that you don't want the people, at the so-called top, like that God can't, or we shouldn't want God to work that way. I just feel like the thing that always comes to mind with these is like the Israelites and wanting Saul as their king. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like we sort of do that of like, okay, we sort of have God, but like if we really want to have change and have, like we sort of want what they have over there, and that's like a good looking, powerful person that we can sort of fall in line under. Like that's how it always comes across to me with some of these celebrity things of like,
Yeah.
do we actually care about like, the state of his soul, or is it just sort of this like insecurity that we need like public validation? Like our faith is more valid now if a famous person, you know, joins the team than it was last month when there were no famous people. Like I don't
Yeah.
know, which just seems so against like scripture, like so against the
Yeah.
way of that we see Jesus doing it.
Yeah. And I guess this is sort of the natural result too of just celebrity culture, and we have celebrity culture and we also have that in the church. And so like I don't in that sense I don't think the church is really very different from the world in how we treat celebrity, I think, and the value that we place on celebrity. And so, this whether it's like a celebrity preacher, I think even in some ways like I think I can even feel that way about like seeing somebody like Wes Huff on the Joe Rogan experience. It's like sweet. So like let's like way to go Wes, like let's rally around him, and it's like he's our guy. And I think he did like it's a super fascinating conversation. He seems like a solid guy, and like obviously like support him in, having these difficult conversations with people who aren't necessarily like he's been like he's kind of made the rounds, and he's been on other pretty big podcasts that aren't necessarily like aligned with him spiritually, but he's having some challenging conversations, and that's awesome. But I think whether it's him, whether it's a celebrity, you know, converting, whether it's like a famous preacher, like getting more famous, like we have that issue, I think, in the church just as much as it is in the world. And I don't know that it's like there's a solution necessarily outside of just reorienting how we like interface with celebrity. Like you can't like make celebrities go away. Like you can't not have famous people just because
As
I
much
think
as some people might want to.
yeah. Yeah, and it's like so how do you like should the church like engage with fame and celebrity in a different way from the world? And I think it should. And so I just think these instances when there's like celebrity conversions or celebrities who, are curious, blowing these out of proportion and sort of holding them up as sort of like trophies of evangelism or something. It's sort of like it's like the big game hunting in a sense. It's like, I got a squirrel, but I got like I got a moose and I'm gonna hang it on the wall and like, that was a big win for the church because we got that guy. That's how it feels to me when you look at some of the responses to these kinds of stories. And there's kind of an ick factor
Yeah, because I think
at
it's even
play.
just yeah, it's just the I think whether we intentional or not, like implicit of like the need for like a platform, like because something like Joe Rogan is like, well, all conversions are equal, but like he has such a big platform and so many people, and like which I mean is factually true, like he
Yeah.
massive platform, and probably more people, but sort of the mindset of like that is what we need though. Like, well, it's more about important for him because he has a platform. And if we
Yeah.
want to change the culture, like you need a platform. Um, like I remember I had a friend growing up that when we were in like youth group, it was right when like Green Day was like they sort of went mainstream with like American Idiot, the album.
Yeah, yeah,
They've been around for a while, but now they were like everywhere. And like this friend just loved the band. Like he was, just listened to it nonstop. And like every time like at youth group or he'd just say a prayer, like he'd always pray for Green Day, which again, pray for anyone. There's nothing wrong with praying for people. But there was this sense like, he was sort of like, but if we can just get Green Day to convert, like just think of the influence they would have because everyone's listening to them.
yeah,
Well, like maybe that's true. It'd be great if they converted. Like they don't seem on the cusp of doing so, but that would be great. As though like we're not praying about the people at our school or the people at our like on our sports team. It's like, well, if we can just sort of pray, like because real change will happen if people with platforms, if they
right.
convert. Which I mean,
Well,
like if we just look at scripture, like Jesus did the exact opposite of that. Like
yeah,
it's like he had the opportunity to go to the city and convert and like purposefully, and like when he had the chance to convert and like the pilots, the influential people, like he basically just wouldn't even talk. Like he'd just sort of stand there silently. Like it's like for him, like it wasn't. That's not how he was going to turn. And again, like I know just because something happened doesn't necessarily mean that's like well, therefore Christians,
right.
we got to
It's
be everything like the first century, and the start of the church was a different time. But I do think there is no question that like Jesus, when he was doing his ministry, was very bottom up rather
yeah,
than like aim for the people with platforms. So I do think it's interesting. We'll see sort of what comes out of it, but I think it does definitely sort of touch on that tendency of just the fixation that the church has with celebrities and platforms, which I just think is something that as Christians we need to guard ourselves against.
for sure.
So there's anything else that we might need to guard ourselves against, but perhaps not as much as we did in yesteryear. And that is that, like I said, this is June. We're recording this, first week of June. So this is Pride Month. Every month we sort of these same conversations come up. Then there's the fighting online and the boycotts and the accusations of being bigots and all that kind of all that fun stuff that we love to do, instead of enjoying the beautiful sun and going for walks and enjoying life. We got to argue with people online. So
Naturally.
Pride Month is always one of those where, you can mark on the calendar that there's going to be conversations. But it has been interesting because like, even we were talking the other day about this and like, obviously incredibly anecdotal, but like, I think we both sort of forgot that it was Pride Month. Usually you can't forget
Yeah,
because it is like, June 1st, Pride Month. Everywhere you look, every, icon on every business logo, like, the department stores are all pulling out their Pride stuff. Like it's, it's usually everywhere. And it's like, I really haven't seen much of it. Like, I think the only one that I can think of is like, I'm a big San Francisco Giants fan for baseball. I lived in San Francisco for a couple of years and like, they changed their logo to like the rainbow, but I mean, like, they're San Francisco. If anyone's going to change the logo, it's going to be a San Francisco-based sports team. But I haven't seen a lot of the other like usual sort of suspects doing that. Um, and it's interesting because then I came across a study that's been kind of passed around. I found it in like CNN. New York Times was quoting it. It's a Gravity Research Survey, um, which was they like surveyed over 200 sort of corporate executives, again all anonymously, but just sort of about like, and like, these are all like Fortune 500, like the biggie sort of out, companies, and I kind of pulled them about their plans for Pride Month and activity. And like our eyes have not deceived us because it does seem, at least from this survey, that like there is an intentional pullback of sort of the usual. So a couple of the key findings in the and maybe we can we'll link this into the description, but a couple of key findings says 39% of companies plan to reduce pride related engagement in 2025. Says notably no respondents reported plans to increase engagement. It says 61% of executives cite the Trump administration as the top reason for rethinking pride strategies, with conservative activists and GOP policymakers close behind. Said employee pressure, once a key influence, has waned. And then there's a couple other, it says, despite the pullbacks and external facing efforts, many of these companies are still planning internally to support these causes, and they're just not going to do the very external outward stuff. And then it says also 65% of respondents say they are actively preparing for backlash, crafting reactive communication strategies and training HR teams to manage internal sentiment. And kind of the last, the summary of the survey, where they sort of summarize the findings below that, says the message from corporate America is clear. In 2025, pride engagement isn't disappearing, it's being re-engineered. As polarization deepens, brands are favoring lower profile, internally focused strategies that minimize public exposure while signaling commitments to their employees. Uh, so I don't know. I think there's some stuff with this, because this is, again, the whole pride thing has been a constant focus of conversation, and sort of what do Christians do, about what conservatives do. How do we sort of navigate this? How should businesses respond? And it does seem like, whether the eyeball test or the data test or anything in between, like, that there's been a shift this year. And like the survey says, like, I mean, you can probably trace a lot of that directly to the fact that we've changed you know, the administration in the White House, and that sort of shifts
Yeah.
some of the. What are your initial thoughts on some of the survey data, and sort of how things seem to be changing with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think partly I wonder if some of this is has some of the sort of corporate messaging and pandering to particular groups. Has that also just kind of reached its peak naturally? Because I feel like, a year or two ago, like you said, like you were not allowed to forget that it was Pride Month. And so it's like, it just seemed like everywhere you looked, every single company, you couldn't buy, laundry detergent without being reminded that, hey, it's Pride Month, keep those clothes clean because it's Pride Month, And so I wonder if partly this is kind of like it peaked, and so now we're sort of on the downward slope of how much are companies willing to like dole out resources for these causes. Not that they don't believe in the causes, but um, is it going forward a winning strategy to to be responsible to their shareholders? And so I think what we're seeing, there's that aspect, and then also the combination of, you have an administration that is less interested in promoting, let's say, um, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and along with that, LGBTQ pride and all the rest of it. And so I think those two things, it's like companies at the end of the day want to sell products and make money. And, I think what people forget is that that's their reason for existence. It's not to promote ideologies, it's not to, champion causes. Like, although that's very in vogue, and I think for a long time, that's, you think about even the term like B corporations, and, like Patagonia was a big company that did this, like very, you know, visibly. So there's all these sort of things that, to try and like make people feel better about companies making money. It's like, yeah, but we do this and we give things to that. And it's like, see, like we're cool, like buy our products, support your causes. And it's like, so I think just a big part of it is like companies want to make money. And, in this political climate, I think a lot of these companies are saying, hey, let's back off of some of this, at least um, outward show of support, because, maybe we're not going to sell as much because, like, the CNN article, I think it talks about the backlash from the Dylan Mulvaney issue with Bud Light. I mean, Bud Light is, you know, it's funny because it's like you saw this backlash, but now they're right back to where they had started. Like they course corrected, if you will, and nobody's who drinks Bud Light is not drinking Bud Light still. Like everybody's back on board with their favorite, light beer brand or whatever. And so, and the result of that is like responding one to their customer base, but also to the backlash because what does Bud Light want to do? Like they want to make money because they're a company and they
Because
sell
that's, I
products.
mean, my one of my theories is that I again, there's obviously going to be exceptions to this and depending on the company, but I don't imagine that many of these companies are bemoaning the fact that they're scaling back. Like I think they
Yeah,
are more than happy to. I mean, they're going to get backlash the other way now, but I think they're going to get less backlash than the people
right.
who want more of it, as opposed to. But I think what some of this shows to me is just that it was never really about the thing. Like
No,
it was very much driven by this culture of like fear and pressure of like, you know, like you're catering to even like a smaller demographic of your, consumer base, but like you got to do that because there's this sort of this witch hunt fear of like you
right.
don't want to get slapped on that, that label,
You don't want to be
as though
anti
yeah,
whatever.
as though that has really, hurt, Chick-fil-A sales or something. But there's this
Right,
sort of this fear of like, well, we don't want to, we got to make sure that we're, and like, back in the last, Biden administration, like it was, that was more the, like, you just sort of see it riding the wave. Like it's,
right,
it's not really like, it's all sort of a meaningless gesture that no one really, or at least most people don't really care about. Their heart's not in it. They don't want it necessarily, but it's, well, we got to do it because we don't want to get, the internet, we take that to be real life and people are going to be mad and call us names and we don't want that. So we got to, even if it means we're losing tons of money and like, it just, I don't know. Like, and again, I think the smaller the company and stuff, some of that, it's not as simplistic as that, but it does seem like it just shows how meaningless a lot of this stuff is. Like, it's just a
yeah,
bunch of empty gestures of people trying to appease people and not get in trouble. And as soon as they're not appeasing, they're getting more people mad than they are appeasing. They're happy to go back and change their policies, and they might say, we're still doing internal stuff to appease this side. But I think they're more than happy not to make that their big focus this year.
yeah. I would be shocked if there were many who were just like really disappointed that they weren't, spending a ton of June's budget on pride parades or whatever. Um, and I think it does reveal that like again, like these companies' interests are monetary and they are interested in making money. And I think it is, I mean, that's why I call it like sort of pandering to one side or the other, because at the end of the day, that's what they're doing. Like they're trying to sell more products. And if they think they can put on a big display and sell, products to a certain community for a certain month out of the year, then they're going to do that. But it's like the idea that they were also like ever really cared deeply about whatever the cause, like, you know, LGBTQ or whatever cause you think Target should be, promoting. No, they don't really care about that. And I think, you know, hopefully, like I don't know, I guess my take would just be that hopefully this is just businesses can kind of get back to like being businesses and not sort of the arbiters of like moral outrage. It's like I don't know that we need like Target or Starbucks or Amazon sort of telling us how we need to feel about something or, standing for whatever different causes. Like I
Which is
think if
funny because I feel like they're like usually cast as the villains in society. Like
well it
the big
I'll,
corporations, like we
yeah,
hate these guys, but like we also
except for
want them
Pride
to tell
Month.
us, like
Yeah.
morally and all, ethically and spiritually and all these things. It's like no, like maybe they should focus more on just not like abusing their employees or
You-
make sure they're paying rather than some of these
right.
moral things. Kind of the one aspect for this that I thought we could at least touch on just real quick is like kind of from a Christian perspective, because I think this also ties into um, just that idea of sort of the top down or bottom up of like, like is, was the fact that Target was making money by putting their rainbow shirts in the front of their store for a month, like, was that is that really, you know, making big shifts in like the sexual identity of Gen Z or something? Like, was it really doing anything, or like was it all sort of just noise? Like, and now that it's gone away, like, is the fact that now they're not putting their displays quite as prominently, like, does that mean like, pride is no longer a thing? We're back to sort of, America's back to traditional biblical teaching on sexuality, like, or is it like can you? It's just sort of like for me, it's just like the emptiness of that top down thing of like I think these statistics are going to be taken as a huge win by a lot of people. Like sort of that
Yeah,
culture war mentality of like, what we're really, like we're sort of, we're fighting sort of the external kind of empty parts, but not going deeper. And it's like, because we think we've sort of solved the issue. Like kind of the example I think of is like, I know we've talked on this podcast, like, you can have a musician that just sings like foul anti-Christian lyrics in all their albums and like songs, and like Christians don't say anything, but then like they go to perform at the Grammys and they like dress in red and put some horns on, and it's like outrage, Satan, the Satanists, pushing Satanism, Satan on our kids and all this stuff. And it's like, well, like, are people going to not believe in God because some like 24-year-old pop star put on some devil horns to do a concert? Or like, is is the bigger influence more the lyrics and sort of what that represents and kind of what feeds those lyrics and like the minds, the sort of like at the deeper level? But it's way easier
yeah,
to push back against the very overt in your face, like, and I feel like that's sort of what we do with the pride stuff of like, okay, if we can just have, hold these stores accountable, not that we shouldn't do that, like, I'm not saying like don't, you have to like necessarily choose, but like just because they're not doing that and like, companies, 39% of companies are going to do less, like that doesn't necessarily speak to the root of the issue, like that just sort of deal that makes it more comfortable for some of us maybe, that like we don't, or whatever, however you want to take it, like
yeah,
that. I just hope that it's not seen as like too much of a, you know okay, we've solved the issue, we can just sort of top down and force companies to, to organize their store plan in a way that we feel like is better for us, than like, therefore, America's back to being a Christian nation. And it's like, I don't know, like I think that I just don't think that that's how you change. Like, you're not changing hearts by holding Walmart accountable for some of these things.
yeah. I think it's very much just like symptom chasing, and I think that's sort of what the broader conversation around these things are. Whether it's you're getting like mandatory Ten Commandments on school walls in public schools in, you know, Mississippi or Louisiana, wherever that was a few years ago, or, companies are less vocal about their support of, you know, LGBTQ stuff. It's like those two things aren't wins or losses for like the church or for Christianity. But it's again, we as humans love shortcuts, and so it becomes a measurable thing. And because we can measure it, we deem it important. And so you're going to just see, I think, in the probably coming weeks, if not already, conservative slash Christian outlets sort of promoting these findings of gravity research, like, hey, this is like, we're winning the culture war. Like, yeah, this is why, you know, Trump is in office or whatever. Like, this is, that's why he's our guy. And, but all you're doing is chasing these symptoms, and you're sort of enforcing certain outward appearances. And like, the Bible has a lot to say about outward appearance versus state of your heart. And so, but again, we don't know the state of people's hearts, but we can judge the outward appearance. And I think with all of these things, it's you're constantly coming back to just, well, what's the easier thing to look at and judge and measure and say, hey, we're winning or losing. And I just think it's maybe a wrong way to to approach a lot of these sort of cultural conversations that are being had. And I think some of the takeaways just end up getting skewed, and you end up focusing on the wrong thing and not the stuff that's actually important.
Yeah, and I think you see, it's sort of like the president like using executive orders. Like it's like
Yeah,
if your way of doing culture change is just sort of like top down enforcing behavior with power, and like then like as soon as you have a different leadership or different
yeah,
power, like you're just going to it's like, well, I thought we sort of, I thought we addressed all this, and now we're right back to where we were. And corporations now are, 39% are going to do more this year. Like it's like
right.
if you're just sort of riding that wave, but you're not actually changing anything. So I don't know. I'm curious to sort of see how the rest of this. Like it does seem, if nothing else, that like even if the reasons why are not sustainable and all that kind of stuff, like that there is a very clear like chain. Like even like I took my kids to me and my dad went to Buffalo, New York, to watch a hockey game a couple months ago, and we didn't realize at the time I was taking my kids like the tickets we got were for their Pride night. And like there's been so much talk about the hockey Pride nights and the tape and controversies, and like but it's like had we not known that it was Pride night, like we probably wouldn't have known it was Pride night. Like there was very like
Yeah.
it noticeably scaled down. Like they had sort of the stuff for those that wanted it over in the lobby area. Like other than that, it was a normal.
And I think, and you know, companies and organizations can do what they want to, but I think, why not do it that way? Like if you want to have like either, and I think we talked about this when that whole hockey thing was blowing up a while ago, but either go all in and have a night for everybody, or just don't do those nights. And if you're gonna do a night for everybody, like make it a little less like forced down your throat and a little more like optional. And I think maybe that can be a lesson that some of these companies can take. It's like, okay, you can do that, but I think what people don't like, kind of like what we said last week, um, but just this idea of being lectured to. And I think that's what happens a lot of times with a lot of the pride stuff, and sort of the pushback against it is like, don't you as a company lecture me on, how to live or what I need to be in favor of or against. And so I think like, I just think that's something that hopefully we can maybe come back to more of a neutral ground
Yeah,
with.
especially when it feels so, like
Totally contrived.
Target wasn't giving away free Pride shirts to help support the mission.
Yeah.
Like they're very much using Pride Month to try and make a lot of money
To
with
sell
Pride.
more pride
Hey,
products.
you can get
Yeah.
a Pride, swimsuit and a Pride this and a Pride that, and you buy one for your family. And if you really believe in these important things, buy our $30 Pride hoodie. And it's like, yeah, to me that's where it gets sort of like, this
Yeah.
is there's an icky the corporate part of it, but something that is never icky and never corporate, always sincere, straight from the bottom of the deepest part of the heart, is the next segment of this podcast, which is things we like that you should like too. So this is my week to share. Uh, I'll be honest, I've been stressed out about this because last week you shared about like streaming farming UK TV shows, and it's like how do I share anything of that kind of cultural value and merit and
I
artistic
know.
excellence? So
The
it's like
bar is impossibly high,
I
Daniel,
don't know,
but I have full
like
faith that
like
you
if that's the
will.
platonic ideal, then I'm just going to be sharing the pale reflection. But I thought I would also share some streaming content that just delivers exactly what it needs to. So I actually don't watch a lot of movies. I mean, like I don't watch a lot of movies like at home. Like I watch because I'm reviewing them. I'm seeing them in theaters. Like I don't actually turn on. Like very rarely I'll just turn on Netflix and find something. But
Yeah.
one of the exceptions I make is for if the movie's got a shark in it, like sign me up. I've probably seen almost every shark movie ever made, and like 95% of them are terrible, and that makes them awesome. So there was one that had got some buzz, and I'd wanted to watch it when it came out, but I missed it, and I haven't caught up. And then I found myself the other day. My kids were asleep. My wife was having a bath, and she was gone for the night. So I had the whole living room to myself, and I was like, "This is the night to turn on Netflix and check out Under Paris. I don't know if you had seen some of the buzz, heard some of this.
I've not heard of this
So
one.
this is a movie that it's French, so it's dubbed or else subtitles,
You don't
which
speak French, Daniel?
makes it even better. That a good French shark movie. Um, so the premise, the quick premise of this is that
Let me guess.
there's a shark and he's hungry, but
And he's
he
in the Seine River.
oh yeah, which is unusual. But these sharks are adapting through some ambiguously never explained Darwinian mumbo jumbo.
It's
They're
called
able
climate
to
change.
that is actually probably part of it. But they can reproduce, and so they're all female, but they just sort of have a bunch of babies, and it's almost like a virus. Like they're just pumping out shark babies. So they need to, but there's a triathlon happening in Paris. But the mayor, of course, wants money, and they don't want to, investigate the sharks that are, the nest. So they have to go blow up, some of the military and some good people have to go blow up the nest. But in the process, they actually blow up a lot of Paris, and Paris ends up underwater, and sharks inherit the earth. Is how this movie ends.
Oh,
Spoiler
wow.
alert. And I mean, like,
Well, I was going to watch it, but now that you've told me the whole thing.
it's the journey, not just the destination. If you want to
Yeah.
see sharks, I mean, there's some good shark carnage. There's some good. Uh, I mean, it has everything you want in a shark movie, which is just
And where can the good people of the internet find such a highbrow film?
well, and they should too, because there's rumors of Under Paris 2 uh, in development. So on Netflix,
Still under Paris.
oh yeah, still under under Paris again. Well,
Yeah.
see, there's not to reveal everything, but there's the end credits allude to that we might have under London, we could have under some other things like these
They've
sharks.
escaped.
They're everywhere. This is like Planet of the Apes, but with sharks, which is,
Awesome.
I mean, like you got Citizen Kane, but like right below that. So I highly enjoyed myself. So if you want to watch bad French shark movies, which are the best kind of shark movies, I highly recommend Under Paris. But other than that, I also recommend that you check us out next week for next week's episode. There's sure to be more stuff to dig into. Again, we've talking to some people, have some interesting guests plan to come on. Obviously, the summer is kind of a crazy time because I know like I'm leaving town part of next week and travel. Summers are crazy, but
Yeah.
there are some interesting people that kind of have lined up to come onto the show. So looking forward to sort of having those conversations. But until then, we will see you next week for more conversations on faith and pop culture.